it's not what we're doing. It's literally the energy that is being put onto
Right.
us. It's our thoughts. That's what's eating up so much energy. So in that situation, indeed, the best thing to think to yourself is, okay, is that mine? Is that my issue? Is that my problem, quote unquote? And the answer would be no. That belongs with that other person. It's not in my control. I can do anything about it. It's their thing. They'll have to fix it. Unless they're coming to me to ask for help, but then I can do something. And then the energy is shifted anyway. But if they're literally just coming to complain or to put their bad mood on me, then I can, first of all, learn to recognize that that's what's happening and say, okay, sorry, but this is not me. This is not my energy. This is yours, and I'm leaving it with you. And that's where it could stop.
To you, I think burnout is a real thing. I've definitely been there. Like, I feel like, so this is the 11th year with my landscaping company, and I feel like I've probably burned out at least once every year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, what would it be like? Officially, maybe not, or like, I don't know if I could be like, quote unquote, diagnosed with it, but man, sometimes it just gets rough,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I had Dr. Jessica Ty on the podcast a while back, and she mentioned that there is a clinical burnout, like it's an actual clinical thing. Like you can be, like I think she mentioned there's like a couple different, I guess, layers of it or different versions of it or whatever. But this is something you can have, I guess, clinical treatment for or something.
Yeah. Well, it would be a very severe case then, I guess. And I don't think most of us actually get into that state.
Okay.
And I think that the stage before burnout is kind of overworked. And I think that's a stage that all of us get into every now and again. But burnout, yeah, I also get asked the question, how do I know if I'm burned out? How do I know if I have a quote unquote burnout? And it's a good question because, yeah, it doesn't look the same for all people. In my case, I had a burnout, I think it's 10 years ago now. And I knew because literally my body refused to function. Like I couldn't get up. I was sitting on the couch, and just the thought of having to take the 10 steps to my kitchen was too much. So I knew I had reached that point where, it was just enough, and my body was not going to do what I wanted to do anymore.
Yeah.
But if you haven't reached that full stage, yeah, when can you say, okay, now I'm burned out? I think it's a feeling for yourself, and it's knowing that you can't go on the way that you have been going on, basically.
Right. Well, I don't know. Maybe now that you put it that way, maybe what I've experienced isn't burnout.
Well, but overworked, I mean, I think we
Yeah.
all have symptoms of burnout for sure.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, it's only getting more prevalent. I mean, I think I shared this research with you that Forbes came out with earlier this year, and they're basically forecasting that in this year, 2025, about 66% of American workers will have some sort of burnout symptoms.
Oh, wow.
66%.
Yeah.
That's massive.
That's a lot.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think it's about time we talk about it
For
openly
sure.
without shame. And to look at, okay, well, what can we do ourselves so we don't have to wait for our employer to make things better, but in the meantime, we can actually already take some control back and say, okay, well, this is what I can do. This is how I can make sure that I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have a conversation here about it. Before we do that, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of tell us who you are and preface the conversation, and we'll dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ellen Duffy Lueb, and I work as a holistic burnout prevention coach. Hopefully prevention, but if it's burnout, it's burnout. And I help people, mainly women, who work in demanding international work environments to reclaim the control of their own time and energy, with the goal that they can then thrive without burning out in the workplace. And where this came from, yeah, I just mentioned it. I mean, I had a burnout myself 10 years ago. I was in that demanding international work environment, and I was going for it. I was doing everything that was necessary, like everybody else. And at some stage, it was too much for me. So I burned out. And I needed help. I knew I needed help, and I was looking for help. But somehow I couldn't find the person that could really get me back on track. I found people that were willing to help me get back to work as soon as possible, to be able to function as soon as possible. But I was looking for more because I realized that what I had been doing, my whole work patterns, the whole way I conducted myself in life, apparently wasn't working for me. So I needed something more. And that was the start of my own personal and professional development journey. So I started doing certifications. I became a certified stress counselor for myself, basically. So I knew how to conduct myself.
Mm-hmm.
I became a certified mindfulness trainer. I ended up being a certified life coach. And eventually, I also found a spiritual development program. And it was only after I had been in that program that finally that last bit clicked for me. So after that, I finally realized, okay, now I think I have all the pieces of the puzzle for myself, that I know that I'm okay, and I can be okay in whatever environment I'm thrown into, no matter how hectic, no matter how demanding, I'll be fine. And I started realizing, okay, but if this works for me, I think it can also work for many others. So that's really why I wanted to make the transition from the teaching job that I've had for many years in the meantime, to really go and dedicate myself to this training and coaching business, because I believe it's needed. And because I
Right.
believe that there are so many people out there who could really benefit from a different approach to life, basically, where they don't have to rely on their circumstances, on their environment per se, but where they can really believe that they will be okay, regardless of what the circumstances are doing.
So, your experience of burnout, if I'm understanding correctly, it's like you didn't feel the same like passion, or you didn't feel drawn to this thing. Like am I understanding that correctly? Like you felt like, I forgot how you worded it, but you basically got to a point where it was no longer attractive for you to pursue, or you didn't really feel that attachment to it. Is that right? Something along those lines?
No, because at the time I wasn't in this business yet. So I was working in a very demanding international business environment. I was in
Okay.
international marketing research.
Right.
And I was just going through all the motions and doing all the things, going to make a career for myself, putting in all the work hours, the stress, everything. And everybody else was doing it. So it wasn't strange. I was just following along with what was expected, basically,
Right.
until I burned out.
Okay.
And then I was trying to find the right help for me, which I had a hard time finding. So that's how I ended up going through this journey of just going through program after program and trying to help myself, to now get to the stage where I'm like, okay, I think I have it figured out for me. And I think that this can also really benefit others.
Okay. But the job that I guess what I was saying, the job that you were in, you got to the point where that was no longer a good fit for you. Is that right? Or like there was just.
So that's what I
Okay.
worked with a coach on, indeed. So
Okay.
I did go to a coach, and basically we went through, okay, what are my values? What are my interests? What is it that I need? What is it that I'm looking for in life? And indeed, at that point, I did decide, okay, maybe this international marketing research business isn't my dream anymore. It's not what I really want. So I'll look for a switch. And that's how I ended up going into education.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how often do you see with the people that you work with, because I don't want to say lack of purpose, but like how often do you see that a lack of purpose towards a thing that somebody is working on is the cause of the burnout? So like, for example, if somebody has something, a business or a career or whatever, and they feel that there's nothing there higher or deeper to work on, there's just no sense of purpose. I mean, is that a common thing that you see?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a big factor. I mean, if you're doing just the motions for the sake of the motions, I mean, over time, that's going to suck out, or to really take up a lot of energy. That's not being replaced by a passion. So yes, it's definitely, oftentimes it's a part of it. And I think that's also what a lot of burnout coaches focus on, to really look at, okay, are you still a good fit for this company? Are you still a good fit for this industry? And that tends to be the main focus moving forward. And then it's decided, okay, yes, you should stay, or maybe no, you should find something different as an employer. But I don't believe that's the whole picture. I don't think that's all of it. And I think the part that I was missing in that was that, okay, sure, now I've removed myself from this, what I considered to be, looking back, pretty stressful environment. But I also realized, okay, I'm now being placed in a new environment, and there will be stress there too. Different, but there will always be challenges. There will always be situations that I maybe find challenging that I will have to learn to deal with.
Yep.
And I think that was the part that I was looking for.
So you mentioned that you don't think, like, I think purpose is a big part of it. I agree with that. I think we agree with that. But then you also said that you don't think it's all of it, and I think I also agree with that. Because I don't know, man. Like, I push the message about purpose a lot, and I think that's important. Like, to have a higher purpose, to have a reason, that you're there doing this thing.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I don't think it's not really big enough. I mean, it's big, but it's not it, because then you also have like identity too. You have your identity attached to this thing that you're working on, and that can go several different directions, because if it doesn't work out and you have your identity attached to this thing, then your identity is going with it. Yeah. But you also need a sense of identity to be able to do the thing, like, because I mean, I say a lot on this podcast, like, when you're trying to do something, build a business or a career or whatever, go to the gym, build a relationship, whatever it is, there's going to be a lot of times where it's uncomfortable or not, it doesn't feel optimal to do the things that you need to do to make that work. And then one thing that's really helped me, and what I tell people is, if you have sort of those either routines or philosophies or whatever they are tied into your identity, and you do that because you are that person, like I said, it's just I think this is like, it sounds like this is all balance. There's all balance in this.
Yeah. At the end of the day, yes. But I agree also with what you're saying, indeed. So it's, what is your identity? Do you place your full identity on what you do on a daily basis? And, let's face it, our job is a big part of what we do for the oftentimes the biggest chunk of the time that we get to spend. So do I see myself as what I do for a living, as a job, whatever else? Or can I also see myself separate from that? Is it not my full identity? Is it something I do? Maybe something I love, maybe something I have a real passion for? Great. But if something were to happen there, what's left of me?
Right.
And I think that's also one that's kind of, it can overlap, but I don't think it should be the exact same thing.
Yeah. And that's actually a good point too, because I talk a lot about, like, how entrepreneurs or creative people, a person who creates a thing, there's a lot of times there's a lot of identity or, self-worth attached to a thing, because we put so much work into it. We're creating something that didn't exist before we created it. Like, we're bringing something to the world. So it's very easy to have, our own value maybe attached to that. But I think the reason, like what you're talking about, the way that this all works is like the burnout. If a person, because when I was talking to Dr. Jessica, I think there's 3 different burnouts. There's underachieving, so you feel like you're doing too much work and not achieving enough. There's overachieving, if I'm not mistaken, where you're doing all this work, but the results you're getting are not. Wait, I have this backwards. Overachieving is like, what would that be? That would be if you have the results coming in, but the work is not fulfilling. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's how. Anyways, I don't know the 3, but if you if you have your sort of your value or your identity attached to this thing, the success or failure of this thing, I think the explanation for that would be burnout. Like, because if we have our identity attached to a project or whatever, and that thing doesn't work, and then we feel like we lose our sense of, it's almost like a sense of ourself, with that.
Exactly.
I think that would be one of the things that leads to, I'm just trying to like flesh this out, I guess out loud, because I say a lot that we do have our identity attached to that thing. I'm just trying to put a word to what that would be. And I think burnout's pretty close. I think burnout is pretty close to having this thing take part of us if it fails.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's a real blow, right? So if all of a sudden your external world doesn't match, or the outcome, the result that you were expecting doesn't match who you thought you were, well, yeah, that's going to give you a massive blow.
Mm-hmm.
And can easily lead to burnout. And it doesn't have to, maybe always, but I could see that would be a big reason that it could lead to burnout indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting, man, because I think, and I mentioned this too when we first started talking, I think we all think that we're supposed to experience some sort of burnout or something related to burnout to have success.
Yeah.
And I guess it depends on how we define success. Like if you're looking for short-term success, maybe, possibly, but I don't think that's sustainable long term, and it's certainly not sustainable for us to look at another person's schedule and try to mimic that. I think there's been way too much of that going on in the past, 40, 50 years, whatever it's been. But I do think though now people are starting to have more conversations about like doing what works for you. If that's 8 hours of deep work, or if that's 12, or if that's 4, whatever it is. But I think that conversation is important. This made me think of this. I read a quote the other day. I'm sure you've heard of like flow state, being in your flow state.
Mm-hmm.
It said something along the lines of being busy is like having control, or having flow with control, but being in flow is like having control of the flow, if that makes sense. So if you're like in your flow zone and you're like working through, like for me, it's like I feel that like 3 or 4 hours is like my peak flow, and then after that it's kind of like, I don't want to say less important things, but like,
Yeah.
I guess easier things, if you can call it that. But for those 3 or 4 hours, man, I'm like, it's like very, very intense focus, and you can, if you find out what that thing is for you, you can go a lot farther than trying to burn yourself out by this nose to the grindstone mentality. Now, when I say 3 or 4 hours, that's either preceded or followed by, 4 or 5, 6 hours of things. But I mean, it just depends on the day, the week, or whatever. But yeah, I think being consistent with that, like whatever that looks like for you. And I think, and like I said, I think there's that conversation is being had right now, and people are starting to realize what that is for them, because I'm sure one of the quickest ways to burn out is try to follow a schedule that's not really, that's not meant for you, to try to follow somebody
Absolutely.
else's schedule.
Yeah. But that's the hard part, I think, of this whole journey, is the trying to figure out what does work for you and what maybe doesn't work as well for you. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, we're very used to follow our surroundings. We're very used to following other people. We're very used to following what our friends are doing. We're very used to just mimicking what our colleagues are doing. It's kind of like these expectations, right? That, there are certain expectations that people have of us. And so we'll just have to make it work.
Right.
And that starts early, because it starts already from when we're a child, and you're to do what your mom and dad tell you to do, or in school you're supposed to do what your teacher tells you to do. And we're not really learning to check in with ourselves and see like, hey, okay, but if I do that, how do I feel? Is that okay for me, or do I feel bad or not? It's basically just a no, you have to do it, so do it, right? So slowly but surely we learn to follow the crowd. We learn to follow what our environment says we should be doing, and we kind of get a little bit disconnected from what that does for us, for most of us anyway. And I actually think that's a big part of why we now struggle with so many to find our way, to make it sustainable for ourselves, because we haven't really learned to do this before. It's kind of like a new skill that we're trying to develop now, to actually check back in with ourselves and see, oh, okay, well, but if I continue to work for 5 hours straight without taking breaks, maybe my colleague can do it and it's perfectly fine. But if I do it, I can't do that for a full week, 4 months, or a year, right?
Right.
So it's really starting to learn to see yourself more as an individual in that sense, and to accept that no, we don't all function in exactly the same way.
Mm.
Like you said, we need to figure out, okay, what does work for us on the longer term, um, and where do we just need to be careful that we're not running too far ahead of ourselves and not go into burnout eventually.
Well, I don't know, man. For me, it's weird because I say this, but then at the same time, and this is coming from the person who claims he burns out every year, but like I think that we have to push ourselves past what those limits are to find out what they are. You know,
True.
I
True.
think initially, and this isn't a long-term thing, but I think initially you do have to push yourself to a point. I mean, maybe not to burnout, but to a point to where you can back off and optimally, sustain whatever that level is.
No, that's it. I agree with you there. I mean, it's trial and error, right? It's not that you say like, oh, ooh, I shouldn't be doing anything because, oh, maybe I'll go into burnout.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Then you'll go into a
I just,
bore out.
man, I don't know, dude, because I'm like, this in the self-help world and the personal growth world, there's a lot of people, on YouTube and all this kind of stuff, and it's just like, um, the message I think is that you're supposed to be basically like burning out. That's what the message is. Like if you're not, if you're not in the gym every day, you're not in the gym, or if you're not working every day, you're not working enough, or whatever it is. And it's like people hear that, and I've had this experience. I've talked to like high performing people, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking like best salesperson in their company, and they're like, well, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. I'm like, dude, you are literally the top, like you're the top performing person. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that the issue, and I don't have any issue with these YouTube videos or whatever that are meant to motivate and inspire people. I think those are very good. But I think the problem is that and I think this is a high achievers mindset, that you feel like you're not doing enough, even though you have these results. You feel like you should be doing more, and that of course is what ensures that you will do more. That's what perpetuates your success. But at the same time, I think that we should give ourselves some credit and say, look, I'm the top performing salesperson. I'm XYZ, whatever it is. Like, you should give yourself some credit for that, because I think those messages and that stuff on YouTube, I think that's meant for maybe people who aren't as motivated or as dedicated. It's meant to sort of inspire those people. But when at a certain point, man, you kind of have to back off from that and say, okay, well, like when I was getting to the point where I wanted to be motivated, I was becoming my best friend. I was there to motivate myself. Now that I'm somewhere where I feel like I can maybe optimize or sustain that, I don't want to be my own worst enemy by saying that I'm not doing enough or beating myself up because I worked, 12 hours instead of 13 or whatever it is. And so I think that sort of relationship with yourself is important, but I don't think you can have that relationship with yourself until, and I hate to say it this way, but until you prove yourself to yourself by first going through what you feel like are those limits. And I'm not saying you have to burn yourself out or hurt yourself, but you do have to push yourself to find out, first of all, what your limits even are. I mean, this episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy.
True. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is trial and error. It is live and learn. Um, and it, as you say, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a high achiever and with pushing yourself and with looking for your boundaries and seeing how far you can go. Absolutely. But what I like to compare, well, let's say, I don't know what the percentages of workers that are knowledge workers these days. So working with their heads, their minds for most of the day, right? Sitting at a desk and a laptop. Um, but I like to compare ourselves, and especially the high achievers, to athletes. We're technically brain athletes. We're using our brains all day long, and we're really trying to get the best out of them. And that's great. And I think we're good at it. But I think we all know and accept that the way physical athletes work, so sports athletes, is they know that they can peak. But after the peak, they also have to rest. They have to recover. They have to give themselves the right nutrition. So there are all these factors involved that they do to be able to peak at the right moments.
Right.
That's technically what we also should be doing, but on a mental level. We can't expect from ourselves that we can just keep going and going and going at a very high level without ever taking a break. It's just not physically possible.
Yep.
And this is completely accepted from, as I said, sports athletes. We know that that's what they have to do. Everybody knows that that's what they have to do. But why do we not accept that that is also what we have to do when we work as a mental athlete, right? As a brain athlete. And we know this as well. I mean, the science is all there. The science is very clear that if you continue for, let's say, hours on end trying to do deep work for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, it's not actually physically possible. So we might tell ourselves like, oh, I'm working hard and I'm being really productive and I'm logging 12 hours in the office today, so look at me. But in terms of what we can actually achieve in that time, we could have done the same in 6 hours of actual deep work with breaks, right? And I think this is a mentality shift that we also have to start making as a society, that it's not just about the quantity of hours that we're putting in, but that it's really about the quality of hours that we're putting in, because that's what really gives the high quality output that we're looking for.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you make, because there's a difference in being busy and being productive.
Absolutely.
Like, I know on the entrepreneurial side, it's very easy. Well, I wouldn't say very easy, but it's easy to do the things that are like the day-to-day stuff to keep the business running, that kind of. But like what really, as far as an entrepreneur goes, what really challenges you is the creative aspect of it. Is bringing the creative to fruition, whether that's through a new sales, a new product, a new service, marketing for that new thing, whatever that, like bringing that new thing into existence. For me, at least, on my journey has been, that's like you'll hear people say, if they have a big project or something coming up, they'll work around it. Like they won't work on it. They'll just like kind of work around it, like do all these other extra things. It's not really related to the thing, and it's kind of like that. I feel like with that creative part of it, whether you're because going back to what we said earlier, like that is where, I mean, I guess it makes you feel good if you're doing, like, if you're working on the numbers and you're doing the analytics and all that kind of stuff, it makes you feel good, kind of what's going on. But at a certain point, you have to work on the product or the service and bring that thing to the market. And I don't know, I guess it's because, that is like, I mean, all these other things matter, but that thing, product or service, whether or not the market's going to like that or accept it or buy it or it's, whatever, that is like the success or failure of the thing, So, and I guess if you take a step back and you look at it, and I'm not saying these other things aren't important, but it's like the risk of the thing working or not working, I think is directly tied to how easy or not it is to work on that thing, if that makes sense. So in other words, it might, I think for a lot of us, it might be the most, we hear the 80-20 rule, whatever gives us the 20% that gives us the 80% of the results, maybe that 20% is what we really have to focus on that deep work. We had to, I don't want to say force ourselves, but we kind of have to force ourselves. But what's crazy, man, is like a lot of people don't really even know the difference of this. Like they don't know what that 80-20 is for them. They don't know what they can delegate, what they can't delegate. They don't know what they should spend their deep work on, that kind of stuff. And I mean, I've been there. I've spent, that deep work for me is like mid-morning. That's like an optimal time, like 10 a.m., 12 p.m. somewhere in there. So that's like, that to me is my optimal. And sometimes, man, when I've had those deadlines or those big things to work on, I've done that. I've spent that time on something that really could have been done at another time, not in that optimal flow state. But I don't know. I guess, like I said, it's because we have that sort of risk of that thing failing or, whatever in that. But I don't know. To go back to the original point, I think being busy and being productive are two different things for sure. But I don't know. I think a lot of us, we just want to feel like we're doing something that matters, and so we want to keep busy, like stay busy, But I don't know, man, you have to really analyze and ask yourself, like, why are you doing this specific work? Not the bigger picture, but this specific thing. Are you trying to work around a thing? Does it need to get done? You can't delegate it. Does it have to be done right now? Like, what is it? Are you avoiding a bigger task? I mean, there's a lot of different questions there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really the time management aspect. Huh? So that's indeed like, how do you actually spend your time on a daily basis? And I think in a lot of work environments, there's a lot of crisis management going on. So it's
Mm,
whatever comes up, and it's said it's urgent. It needs to happen right now, right now, right now.
yep.
And that's what gets priority. Whether it's actually something that's going to produce like part of that 80%, like you said, probably not. But it's something that feels good because we can cross it off our list and it's done. And somebody said it was urgent, so there you go, it's done. The problem is that most of our days actually are filled with these little urgent moments that we're crossing off our to-do lists, and it feels good because every time we can cross something off, we're like, yes, we accomplished something, right? It's the productivity. And we get a little boost, a little adrenaline boost. But at the end of the day, and when you look back, you might go like, wait, but what did I actually do today? Does it feel like I really did something
Yeah.
meaningful, something productive? And that's kind of like the productivity trap that most of us, many of us, get caught into.
Mm,
That it's like, yeah, we've been busy, we've been doing things all day, but what? What's the outcome? What's the result? What am I carrying over into tomorrow? And oftentimes it's not much, because tomorrow the same routine starts all over again. We're
right.
doing things, we're doing all these things that are urgent at that moment, but they're not
Mm.
helping us to build anything lasting. They're not helping us to build anything sustainable. So yeah, I think that's the time management that we also need to wrap our heads around, and set priorities that are actually matter for us.
Yeah, man, time management is critical. Like I used to think when I was first in business that if I stepped away for a day or whatever it was, that I was gonna, fall behind or whatever.
Yeah,
But now, man, if I take a day or a couple hours or whatever it is away from a thing, depending on how big the thing is and how, quote unquote stressful it might be, if I take some time away from that, by the time I go back to it, it's like I'm recharged. Like I am like I'm twice as productive as I would have been had I just kept working.
exactly.
And yeah, and you mentioned the gym earlier in fitness and like recovering and repairing. I think that's a great analogy because like if it's like you have to give yourself. It's crazy, man. Like I used to think like when I first started business, this was a real thing for me, and it still kind of sometimes to this day is. It would like irritate me. It would be like a Thursday or a Friday. I would try to get in touch with somebody who was an insurance person or a bank, whatever, somebody who operated during their business hours, and I was trying to get a question solved or a thing solved, and it was like, well, they were out of the office that day, they wouldn't be back until Monday. I'm like, dude, this is like 4 days that have been wasted here, and I could have just like solved this thing right then. But now I get it. It's like, okay, and I usually don't take full weekends off. Maybe Sundays I'll do like very light work, but I usually work Saturdays sometimes, some portion of Saturdays. Um, but now I get it though. I get it because these people step away, and I know we're kind of talking apples to apples because, or apples to oranges, because I think a person who's building a thing and a person who's sort of working at a company are sort of
Right.
two different tracks. But I see the value in taking that step back. I see the value in letting yourself recharge. And I've heard people say like every couple months I'll take a week off of the gym, which is crazy because I'm in the gym doing some kind of thing in the gym every day, a different muscle group or whatever it is. And I've heard people say like, "Oh man, if I took a week off, I wouldn't want to go back." I'm like, "No, dude. Like, when you take that week off, like day number 6, you were like ready to get back. Like,
Yeah.
you're just recharged." Uh, and so yeah, there's significant value in that. I think when you mention time management, it's like how we block out our time, but it's also taking like in that block, whatever that schedule is, scheduling time away from this thing to let yourself recover and recharge. I mean, I wish somebody would have told me 11 years ago how important that was.
Absolutely. With you
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's what I do now. So before, whenever I would get myself stuck into a work problem or a challenge or something that I really wanted to get done for that day,
Mhm.
and I would start to feel that stress coming up, and I would start to feel a bit overwhelmed, that will be my cue to dive in deeper, to dig deeper, to really figure it out, make sure that I get that. Now, whenever I get to that moment where I'm like, oh wait, wow, it's a lot. I don't really know. I have something to figure out. I actually step away, and I forced myself to do this now, because at the start it's like your mind is shouting at you like, no, you can't, you have to do this.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, don't care.
Yep.
Actually close my laptop, step outside, go for a 20-minute walk.
Mm.
And it makes all the difference. Because during that walk, my mind gets a break. It's still there. It's still running in the background. But I'm not, it's kind of like I'm not in a cramp anymore, right? I'm not in a cramp trying to figure it out in that moment. But instead, I'm kind of giving it some space to breathe, some space to process everything that's already been taken in by the brain. And it's almost like by giving it that space, my brain can now go, okay, now I see it. We have this, and we have this, and we have this, and we have this, and this is how it fits together. So that after those 20 minutes, when I come back, I'm like, oh, okay, wasn't that hard after all. I see it now.
Yep.
But it's
Well,
literally taking that space that's needed to get to that stage.
there's actually a neurological reason for that. So this is something I learned from Dr. Andrew Huberman. First of all, if you're outside, there's a lot of things that's happening. There's sunlight, you're being in the elements, like there's a lot of things that's going on. But if you're walking or running and you have things passing your eyes, it's called forward ambulation, the forward motion passing your eyes, it literally calms the amygdala, the stress center of the brain. So that's one of the reasons that, you go on a run or something, you're passing by buildings or trees or whatever it is, you see that motion. You can't really get it on a treadmill because you have to have that forward motion from the eyes. Right. And so that's one of the reasons that it calms the amygdala. But yeah, I mean, you're basically talking about. I think the expression is, it's hard to see it's hard to see the trees or it's hard to see the forest when you're in the trees or something like that, something along those lines. So yeah, taking that step back and looking at it from that bird's eye view and saying, okay, and this is why, like, this crazy that this we're going here, because I didn't know we were going to go here, but it's like it's crazy how this translates to things like leadership, because I feel that the best leadership happens not from the top, not from the middle even, but I feel like it's from the back, so that you can see everything. I don't know if this is true or not, but I read a story about how wolves travel in packs, and you would think the alpha wolf, whoever the leader is, whatever, the strongest of the bunch, would travel in the front. But per what this thing said, I don't know if it's true or not, per what this thing said, and even if it's not, it's a good story, the leader follows from the back, so that if someone falls behind, if someone's weakened or whatever, he can help them and pick them up. And I think that's an incredible philosophy to have. I think unfortunately a lot of times what happens is the ego gets in the way, and a lot of people want to lead from the top or the front or whatever. And I'm not saying, obviously you want to have a person who's the leader to be the face of the company. I understand that. But I'm saying the day-to-day leading, I think, is best from the back. And it's the same philosophy. It's removing yourself sort of from the forest so you can see the individual trees,
Right.
I mean, dude, taking a step back is such a huge thing. I want to make a transition really quick, because I don't want to take too much of your time up here. I got a hard stop in about 30 minutes or so. So we've been talking a lot about kind of what burnout is, and like time management and stuff. You mentioned earlier I think it's a 5-step sort of plan. Yeah. So if you had to sum up sort of in one, because I think, like we said, being overworked and burnout are sort of two different things. So if you could sum up like maybe the difference and what burnout actually is, if you had like a 1-sentence thing to describe what that is versus just being overworked, and then if you could, if we have time, if you could take us through your 5-step plan.
Yeah. So the way I see it, and I mean, this is over literature and everything. Burnout is really where you can't function. It's okay. Really where you can't really continue the way you were doing your work before, right? So there's kind of like in the proper burnout, there's really a full stop. It's basically your mind, your body telling you, no, not doing it anymore. Overworked is more the stage before that, where you start to notice that, okay, I'm maybe feeling a bit too stressed too often. I'm exhausted. I'm not sleeping so well. These are all symptoms of being overworked, and also not finding it hard to feed yourself properly, right? Because if we're feeling stressed, then it's easier to go for the fatty, the sugary, the unhealthy bits to eat. So these are all kind of warning signals, right? You can say, okay, I'm feeling a bit overworked. But if I continue on this path, then I can really get myself into a burnout. Yeah. So the 5 steps that I have come up with, I'm calling it now the focus framework. And it really starts with looking at, okay, where is it that I am losing a lot of energy every single day? And the funny thing is that for, let's say, 99% of us, that's in our thoughts, what we think. It's not even what we do, it's what we think. That's where most of our energy gets lost on a daily basis. And it's often without us realizing it, because what we think, I mean, how often do we stop and say, like, oh, what am I thinking right now? Well, not very often during the day, right? You're just in the hustle of doing all the things that you need to do. But in the background, you have all your thoughts that are continuing as well. So I call it our hidden energy trap. And that's basically what it is. So it's really like, what are we worrying about? What are we continuously thinking about, even though we can't really do anything about it, right? So I don't know if you've ever heard of the circle of control. Where
I
it's
have
kind
not.
of like, no, so it's kind of like it's a circle. The middle part is what is actually in your control. So what can you actually control in this world? Well, that's not that much. It's mostly everything that pertains to you personally. That's in your control.
Right.
Then you have the circle of influence. So where do you have some influence? And then you have the outer ring, which is out of your control. And everything that happens around us in the world, politics, the weather, whatever, it's out of our control. There's nothing we can do about it. And especially with the world news and all the information outlets that are coming in on a daily basis, it's a lot of information that's kind of being added to our mind, to our brain. So it's there in the background. But let's say about 80% of that is information that we can't do anything about. There's nothing we can do. So it's there, it's eating up energy. We might be worrying about it. So it's just eating up, but it's never giving us any energy back because we can't do anything. So that is the first step. And it's, I think, the most important step, because it's something that most of us overlook. And especially when we go into a burnout situation, we tend to focus so much on what it is that we do, our to-do lists, right? I have to do this, I have to do that. And yes, that also takes up energy, absolutely. But it's all the worrying, all the thinking that's happening in the background that's actually eating up a bigger portion of that. So identifying that and then seeing, okay, well, what part of this do I maybe now need to actively decide to let go? Because it's not in my control. There's nothing I can do about it. That in itself has been the eye-opener to most of my clients. And taking the actual step and making the active decision to let go of the things that we can control, that, generally speaking, already gives a huge relief. So then it's looking at, okay, well, what actually does give me energy then? Like, what are my energy providers? And that's on 3 levels. That's physically. So you're also looking at nutrition, looking at physical movement, looking at the rest that you're giving yourself. Mentally, also in terms of nutrition, what do you feed your mind? And that's, again, like, what information am I allowing to get into my system on a daily basis? And again, rest is a big part of that. But also social, emotionally, right? So how do I relate to others? And what is the connection with myself? And I think also that part, the connection with yourself, is one that we tend to overlook because we're so outwardly focused. We're so focused on the world around us.
Yep.
So it's really also checking back in with yourself and say, hey, what is it that I need? What is it that I actually gain energy from? What are my interests? What's my passion? What would I love to explore further? So really making sure that balance between energy giver and energy taker, is a bit more optimized. Then it's really looking also. So the first two steps are really about your energy levels. So where do you lose energy and where do you gain energy? And then it's really also looking at, okay, how do I actually spend my time? So first of all, what is important to me? What are my goals? And sometimes we don't even know anymore because we're just doing all the things that people expect that we're supposed to be doing. So it's also good to check in with ourselves and say, okay, well, what is it that I want? What is it where I want to be 3 years from now, 1 year from now? And look at the different roles that we play, right? Because each of us carry many different roles in our lives. So yes, we're a worker. We often have a paid job, so that's one role. But we might also be a parent. We might be a partner to somebody. We have our own personal life. That is also a role. So also to kind of place into perspective the role that our paid job plays. Because yes, it's important, and yes, it provides for a certain way of living, but it's not all of us, right? So again, coming back to the identity part, it's not who we are. There are different parts to us than just that work or role. And then from that perspective, with the different roles that we do carry, then look at your time. What is the time that I have available, and how do I want to spend that time? So yes, within the workplace, but also outside of that, so that that balance is kind of restored a bit more as well. And then the final step is to also look, how am I going to support myself in this process? Because yes, at that time, they're being coached, they're with me, but the point is that they'll be able to continue this sustainably, right? It's not going to be a case like, 2 years later, I'm back in the same situation and I need to restart the program. So it's really, okay, how am I going to be able to support myself in this? And that's where I believe a little bit of that spiritual energy can come into play. It depends on the person, of course, what relationship they have with any type of spirituality. And maybe they don't, and that's also okay. But even then, you can also tap into, okay, well, what would my wiser self say to me now? Right? Because we all have that wiser person somewhere buried deep down inside us, or even my wise grandmother who doesn't live anymore. But I would know what that person would say. I would know how that person would feel about what I'm doing. So that's kind of the last step of the process, to make sure that you feel confident within yourself, that you feel that you can support yourself in that continued journey, and that you can motivate yourself within that continued journey. To basically be there for yourself, and to not get distracted again and go into like, oh, but I have to do this and I have to do that because that person's saying and that person wants me to do this. So really to check back in with yourself and say, well, no, let's also see what I need and how I want
to. Okay. So, all right. So there's what drains you, what inspires you, how are you spending your time, and how can you sustain yourself along this journey?
Right.
Yeah. I think those are, those are definitely critical. I think, I'm sure a question you get is, as far as the time management goes, is that some of that time is going to be spent on things that maybe drain you, and some of it's going to be spent on things that inspire you. And I think, if we're doing anything of value, career or anything else, there's going to be times that probably drain us. But for me personally, when I hear this, what I think of is like, I think those times are sometimes they're inevitable, like we have those moments. But it's like, for me, trying to place those in a time that's optimal, like, for example, I would hope that I wouldn't go through a series of emails that were draining to me either first thing in the morning when I wake up or right before bed. That would not be an optimal time for that.
Right.
Yeah. So, and sometimes we don't have the luxury of choosing when we have to go through these things, but I think the last point of sort of sustaining this, I think if you have that system built with yourself, you're better able to confront or deal with these things that maybe do drain you. Because I think so, man. I've spent a lot of time in the B2B space, with it, just watching other businesses and stuff, and a lot of this, a lot of these things that happen sort of in the corporate space is like I would be willing to bet a huge portion of people's bad days are because something happens at the workplace. Something happens. Somebody says something to this person, an employer, a boss, or whatever says something to this person. That person then projects that onto somebody else. Then that's projected onto somebody, and it's like a domino effect.
Yep.
And so, literally, the entire workplace is having a bad day because the person who started it, was having a bad morning, and they projected that on the. So it's like, we hear a lot about stopping generational cycles, whether it's poverty or abuse or whatever, and those things are 100% important. But I think we should take that same philosophy to the workplace and stop the cycle of, if somebody projects something onto you, because everybody, up the hierarchy, there's always a box to check. There's things that had to be checked off, and somebody's frustrated with somebody else. They take that energy on somebody, and it's just like, if you can stop this, and I'm not saying let people walk all over you, because I do not believe in that whatsoever, but it's like, don't be the person who perpetuates that cycle, and that happens, dude. That happens way more than people probably. I mean, I'm sure some people probably know it because it's their experience, but that happens way more than you would probably think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that's what I said. That's in that first step. It's not what we're doing. It's literally the energy that is being put onto
Right.
us. It's our thoughts. That's what's eating up so much energy. So
Yeah.
in that situation, indeed, the best thing to think to yourself is, okay, is that mine? Is that my issue? Is that my problem, quote unquote?
Mm.
And the answer would be no. That belongs with that other person. It's not in my control. I can do anything about it. It's their thing. They'll have to fix it. Unless they're coming to me to ask for help, but then I can do something. And then the energy
Mm.
is shifted anyway. But if they're literally just coming to complain or to put their bad mood on me, then I can, first of all, learn to recognize that that's what's happening, and say, okay, sorry, but this is not me. This is not my energy. This is yours, and I'm leaving it with you. Right? And that's where it could stop. Then you don't have to go on and perpetuate it to other people in the workplace either, because you can say, yeah, I'm really sorry that this happened to you. Is there something I can do to help you? And that could be your action. And if the answer is no, if they just want to complain, then you can say, okay, well, sorry, but I want to go back to what I was working on.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah.
really that's really that energy management, and saying, okay, sorry, but it's not my problem. Kind of in a bit
Right.
of an awkward way to say it, but that's technically what it is, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's also, like we said, part of, that last step of sustaining yourself.
Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
mean, when you
Setting
are
up the
reactive,
boundary.
like I think responding to the thing and reacting to the thing are two different things. You can respond to it and you can whatever, but like being reactive is something completely different. But yeah, I don't know, man. I'm hearing this and I'm thinking, like, I know it's technically 4 steps, but I'm thinking like 3. I'm thinking energy management, time management, and then like
Yeah,
resource management for yourself. That's
yeah,
that's how I block this out. Uh, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because I think if a person goes through those steps, I can see how it would really help. So what's the connection? I guess the last one will be the connection to burnout, the sustaining yourself through this process. I guess that would be where the burnout is sort of. I mean, because we've kind of talked here about like issues, like confrontational issues in the workplace or stress or whatever. I think those things can clearly lead to burnout, but that's not like uh, well, I guess the relationship, the connection would be like if your time management, like how you're spending your time towards the thing you're working on, or the energy, is it draining you or inspiring you? So I guess that kind of makes sense. I don't know. I was looking at this from a different angle, because, like I said, my experience has been in that sort of, projection, deflected space. Everybody's trying to check off a box and sort of, CYA type mode or whatever. But yeah, I can see the connection with burnout. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that there.
yeah. Well, I think that's really what's happening when you go into burnout. It means you have I mean, it's a total depletion of energy. That's basically what burnout is. It's
Yep.
like you've just lost all the energy that you had. It's gone. And in terms of time, it's while you've been overstepping your boundaries in terms of your own time, right? You've been going and going and going without actually stopping and saying, hey, that's enough. And it goes hand in hand with energy management, because to regain your energy, you'll have to do certain things, or you have to take breaks, or you have to rest, or you have to nourish yourself. So yeah, it's kind of like the different building blocks that are all needed to make sure that you don't go into that burnout on the long term. And to come back to what you said about the time management in your workday, so if you say like, oh, but there's emails to go through and it's not inspiring to me, but I'll still have to do them. Absolutely. I mean, that's life. There will always be things that are important to do that we don't want to do or we don't like to do, and that's okay. But what we can do then is to, for example, give ourselves a time limit. And we can say, okay, you know what? I'm giving myself between 10 a.m. and 10:30, and I'm going through my emails now. And at 10:30, I stop and I really stop, right? So there's a bit of discipline involved there as well. Kind of train yourself to do that. But that way you can really limit it. It's overseeable. It's not the biggest chunk of your day anymore. You get yourself a nice cup of coffee, you open your inbox, and you know that in 30 minutes this is over.
Yep.
And that can be a big help, because that's already just a small step to take back that little bit of control that you have over your own time.
Well, I think when you do it that way, I think it's much more directed, because you're sort of in email mode. You know what I mean? Like you're just kind of like firing back at all these different things. So I think it's more of a, we've mentioned the word control here a couple times, but I think that's much more of a controlled way to do it versus like, just doing something and then randomly think about an email you have to respond to and then stopping that thing doing, and then, that's not the way to do it. I've said this before. I know for me, like being in the gym, and this sounds kind of backwards because a lot of people decompress, but I know me being in the gym for me is like recharging to me. And there's been several times where, there was emails I didn't really know what to say or how to write, but I would not really work on them in the gym, but I would just like think of certain phrases, and then I would be inspired to write the email from the energy, the endorphins or whatever from the gym. So I think the environment too is big on like when you do like if you're fortunate enough to be able to block your day out in blocks, and we're talking about time management, what the environment that you do these things in, I think is really important, because yeah. So I know what, like you mentioned coffee. I send a lot of my follow-up emails while drinking coffee. And it's crazy because, generally if you're drinking coffee, talking to somebody, it's like, this is my experience, at least. It's like the conversation is like cordial, warm, it's just like a good conversation to have over coffee. But it's like, if I do that while I'm sending follow-up emails, I feel like the same energy is in that email, especially if it's somebody I just met, if it's somebody I just met a couple days ago or whatever it was. That's something that's really beneficial to me. But like I said, in the gym, maybe these emails that are a little bit more difficult, I had to think about it, whatever, it's that energy, that flow of energy is it just helps me. So, but yeah, I'm not the person that, I mean, it takes me several hours to wake up. So I am not the person that feet hit the floor and I'm sending emails. I know people like that, 8 a.m. they're calling you. I can't do it. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just not a morning person.
Exactly. So that's
Yeah.
what you have to figure out for yourself. What works,
Right.
what doesn't work, and not necessarily copy what somebody else is doing.
Yeah. So do you have a website or social media or anything?
I do. My website is under construction at the moment.
Okay.
I hope it will be ready by the end of this month. But that is reclaimyourcontrol.com. And I'm also on social, so I'm on Instagram. You can find me there under Ellen_reclaimyourcontrol. I'm on LinkedIn, and there you can find me under my name. So it's Ellen Duffy Lueb. And I'm also on Facebook, and there it's again Ellen_reclaimyourcontrol.
Okay. And I think you might have sent me some things. If you sent me the links, I'll put them in the descriptions. So one thing I ask everybody before we close, if you could share one of the most important lessons you've ever learned, it can be from your for your personal life, if you're comfortable sharing, or your career. What do you think is one of the most important, most valuable lessons you ever learned?
The most important lesson that I have learned is that I am responsible for my well-being.
Mm.
I used to look at my manager, I used to look at the people around me, and now I'm like, no, it's not their responsibility. It's mine. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
It's my time, it's my energy, it's my life. I need to make sure that I'm okay. It took me a while to figure that one out. But once I realized that, I was like, it made all the difference, because now all of a sudden I'm back in control, right? I can make these decisions. I can have the choices. So yeah, that's the most powerful lesson that I've.
Well, and it's I think that's a very empowering lesson too, because if the change is in the power of your hands, that means whether it's good or bad, you have the power to change it. And I think, especially right now, man, 2025, these last few, I would say 6 months or a year even, with politics and all this other stuff, it's like it's easy for us to put change in the hands of somebody or something else.
Yeah.
But I think, systemically, maybe that's true. I mean, anything that's systemic is just people in the system doing certain things. So it still comes back to the individual.
Yeah.
But it's like maybe some things like that operate that way. But I think the vast majority of things we have the control, or at least the control of how we respond to it. Like we were talking about these emails earlier and these confrontations in the workplace. It's like it sounds kind of bad to say, man, but if that drains you, that's really sort of more your fault than it is the person who said that's fault.
Yeah.
But that's that it takes a lot of, I guess, maybe self-realization and a big journey with yourself to sort of get to that point. But man, if you let yourself be influenced by things in the outside world, you're going to be constantly influenced. But I think that's a really good lesson, because I think being empowered to be able to make that change puts it in your hands, and it really takes away that the sort of victim mentality from it, which I think is very dangerous.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it doesn't mean that you can control all of your circumstances, because you can't.
Right.
But you can control how you choose to respond to them.
Exactly.
That's in your hands.
Well, listen, it's been great. Great talking to you. I don't know, man. I feel like burnout is, I don't know. Now that we've had this conversation, maybe what I experienced wasn't burnout. Maybe it was just overwork. But it was like, dude, it was like right there on the line, man. Any farther over, it might would have been burnout. Yeah. But I'm gonna stop the video. I'll explain to you how this thing uploads if you can hang out for just a second. But I do appreciate it. Appreciate your time here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, I really appreciate everybody tuning in today. If you found this content or this episode useful and intriguing, you can visit us on social media. This is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. Pure Wisdom Podcast on all social medias. You can interact with us, follow, like, and share there, and we will see you guys next time.